you very much, Genevieve and co-panelists, and thank you to the Heritage Foundation. And I'd like to thank all of you for your interest in our remarks today, or at least your excitement in seeing Governor Perry and giving us some time ahead of that. We do have a big poll that came out this week on immigration. It's a very deep dive that goes beyond some of these very simplistic, useless questions, frankly, about do you support or oppose, quote, immigration reform. You can ask Americans fill in the blank reform and always get a high response. We support Q-tip reform unless we know what it's going to cost us and what the relative benefits and liabilities are to each of us and to us as a nation. So we took a deeper dive and a look at the immigration reform issue and the immigration issue overall. The entire 10-page memo is provided through a link, and you also have hard copies of it, so it's there for you to see. Let me go over some of the key results that I think also show some of the underlying empirical evidence to some of the remarks made earlier today. First of all, in 27 years of polling, I have never seen immigration at the level where it is in terms of the American consciousness. I think what has happened at the border very recently has brought into sharp relief some public opinion. Out of sight, out of mind is over. People know what they see, and seeing, of course, for the public is the first step toward believing. So what is it they see and they believe? First, you have 18% of Americans saying that immigration is a top issue that they believe Congress and the President should address. That's not going to happen if you ask it the traditional way, what is the top issue that Congress and the President should address? There it'll be 4 or 5% maybe on a high day. But when asking people, is immigration your top issue? Not your top issue, but in your top 3, not in your top 3, but in your top 10, and then not even in your top 10, which is really the way people think. 18% say it's a top issue, an additional 39% say it's not the top, but it's in the top 3. And so you do have a spiking of, I think, paying attention and just pricking the American consciousness. As goes the border situation, the lens through which many Americans are looking at immigration generally, most Americans say it is not humane and compassionate to have the children there. I have hardly seen, these shelters or safe havens set up in Nancy Pelosi's district or Steny Hoyer's district down the street from here. Everybody's got a pie in the sky of idea, but very little action on the issue. The media seem to be in Ferguson, Missouri, as is the chief law enforcement officer, Eric Holder, not down at the border. What Americans say about immigration and the President's role and Congress's role in immigration is very simple. They don't see either party having a natural advantage on immigration, and I'd like to make that very clear. It is true that President Obama's disapproval rating on immigration is over 60%. It's 4 points higher than his disapproval rating generally. But neither the Republican Party nor the Democratic Party right now sitting here has a natural advantage vis-a-vis voters on the issue. Part of it is a lack of a coherent plan, frankly, or lack of a coherent message. If even base voters can tell me what the 4-point or 5-point plan is from either party, I'm listening. But we did test the recently House-passed 3-point plan by the Republican Party, but did not associate it with them. 58% of Americans support and 32% oppose this plan, which basically has 3 main parts. Quote, extra funding for immigration enforcement, making it easier to return young illegal immigrants to their home countries, and restricting the president's ability to act on his own. That goes for any president, not just this president, to restrict a president's ability to act on his own with respect to immigration. In a separate question, 74% of Americans say they would like the president to work with Congress, not on his own when it comes to immigration. And let me read you some key crosstabs there that are in your packet. It's 74% overall would prefer the president to work with Congress. 21% say it's okay for him to go it alone. But it's a majority of independents. It's 81% of independents, 56% of Democrats, 75% of moderates. Really the only subgroup ideologically or politically that wants, that's on page 5, that wants the president to act like the Lone Ranger on immigration are self-identified liberals. There's a real divergence of opinion all throughout the survey between Democrats and liberals, and I would imagine those Democrats include many who are running for U.S. Senate this year as well. So what do people want? Well, the immigration issue is a big issue in and unto itself, but it is also, as has been remarked by my colleagues here, it is also seen as part of the overall economic equation. And just politically speaking, electorally speaking, if Republicans think they're going to run on jobs in the economy for the fifth election in a row, they're probably going to get the result that Mitt Romney got and Ken Cuccinelli got. If you only talk about jobs in the economy, it just means too many different things to too many people. And when you talk about jobs, frankly, to Rich's point, we've been speaking for a while also about the difference between talking to just the job creators, the entrepreneurs he mentioned, that you didn't build that. Most Americans do not fancy themselves entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs. That's about 7% of the country. Another 7% or so are the job seekers, who Rich was talking about. They're the folks who are unemployed, or maybe a higher number chronically unemployed or unemployed and stopped looking. But if you're only talking to the job creators and the job seekers, you're up to about 15% of the country. The vast majority of American households are job holders. And they are the ones paying very sharp attention to what's happening at the border and with immigration policy overall. They are the ones saying, why do we have 2, 3 jobs in our household? We're not worried about losing a job or replacing a lost job, but why is the job no longer enough? And it was enough when your grandfather had a job or when my grandfather had a job. And they do worry about the job security, and they do worry about everyday affordability and long-term economic security. And they look at immigration as one piece of that overall economic equation. So it should not just be looked upon in some hermetically sealed issues package. It is seen as part of the larger macroeconomic picture. And all throughout this survey, it's very clear that Americans don't believe that we have a surplus of jobs. They believe that we have a surplus of job seekers, and they are competing for these jobs. Americans overwhelmingly believe that Americans who want to do jobs, who are looking for work, should have a fair opportunity, if not a preference, to do that work. It turns on its head this cynical meme that illegal immigrants or immigrants do the jobs and Americans just won't do. That is just not true. When you actually put that question to people who are looking for the job, they are willing to do those jobs. They're not willing to do it maybe for $4 an hour under the table, but they are willing to work, and they are looking for these jobs. They do not think we have a surplus of jobs, just a surplus of job seekers. So 50% believe it's unfair that we bring in 1 million immigrants who can look for jobs while millions of Americans are having trouble finding work. 45% believe that the unemployment situation will actually get worse in the next few years. They're not looking necessarily at the monthly jobs report or listening to macroeconomic economists. They are just know what they believe in terms of their own financial wherewithal. 77% believe that U.S.-born workers and legal immigrants already here should have preference for jobs that they are seeking. 89% believe they should have that preference over illegal immigrants. 58%, because I've never seen this question really asked, but 58% agree that there are plenty of Americans to do the jobs in the construction, manufacturing, service industry jobs, service industries. 80% also believe businesses should be required to recruit and train more American workers. So here, a business cannot just sign up for E-Verify and say, look, we're doing our part. They also want businesses to help recruit, retain, and train a workforce that does include many Americans who are looking for work. The upshot of this data also shows that politicians and leaders may be ignoring these issues. They may be ignoring what's happening at the border, but the American people really are not. And it's not as simple as just talking about the same issues over and over again. It really is recognizing them when people see something for a while and the seeing is the first step toward believing. They expect solutions. They expect action. There's a strong, I'll end on this note, there's a very strong consensus for just some very simple economic populist, not conservative or liberal, populist solutions on immigration. One, of course, is to strengthen enforcement of immigration laws. But when a politician says that, it's like them saying, I'm for equal pay for equal work. Well, who's not? Everybody, if you have an 80-20, Richard Wirthlin, God rest his soul, my first job in polling, my first boss in polling said to me 27 years ago, if you see an 80-20 issue, you actually wasted the poll question because everybody agrees with enforcement. But ladies and gentlemen, Americans see that as the floor, really far away from the ceiling. Very far away from the ceiling. So yes, they do agree with strengthening enforcement of current laws. They also believe in encouraging. This is an important word. So many people talk about denying and restricting. They believe in encouraging immigrants who are here, illegal immigrants who are here, to return to their home countries, particularly these children at the border, and encourage them to do that. And they also believe in limiting chain migration to the nuclear family. This is incredibly important to them. Finally, I will say, if you look at the final page, you see a tremendous amount of, I would say, tripartisan, both gender, regional, all ideology agreement that, yes, rule of law, national security, macroeconomic consequences are incredibly important, but really jobs is the primary motivator for awakening action on immigration. You see that Hispanics, even liberals pipe up there, independents, those making less than $40,000 a year, and 85% of blue-collar workers agree with this. They believe that protecting American jobs is an incredibly important point of this immigration equation to them, even if it's left out of the national conversation. Thank you.